and business systems. Today on the APT and Cybersecurity LinkedIn Live event, we're joined by Anne Marie Zettlemoyer, a seasoned cybersecurity executive with more than 2 decades of experience across Fortune 500 companies, startups, government, and finance. She has worked at the intersection of cyber, risk, analytics, and business leadership, which makes her the right person for this conversation. Because visibility is no longer just a dashboard, it may be the new control plane for cybersecurity. Welcome to the event. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the event. My name is Aaron Silwell, and I'm joined by my special co-host, Bonnie Stith. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us. And I see we might be having a little bit of video problems. I cannot still see Anne Marie. She should be with us in a second. I am sorry.
I am here.
Oh, there you go. You are here. But it's okay. It's okay, Anne Marie. We could still do this just even without the video. We've done this before, so that's not a problem. Are you okay with that?
Oh, yeah, I'm okay. I could try just coming out, come back in one more time.
Okay, you want to try that? And
Do we
then
want to do
go
that?
into it? Yeah, that would be great.
All right.
Yeah.
Why not? 3 times the charm.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. If not, we could just do the audio, and that would be fine. But again, we could kind of review our topic today, what we're going over. Our topic is the data problem in cybersecurity, why visibility is the new control plane. So again, we're going to wait 1 second. Here we go, and hopefully there she is. Anne Marie, thank you so much for joining us today.
So great to be here. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So let's get kind of started with the questions. I always like to open just to get an idea of your background, and then we could kind of dig deep into the topic. Can you give us, the audience, just a quick background on your career and how you ended up working across the cybersecurity industry?
Sure. I have been in 10 different industries in the past.
Yep, there it went again.
Yeah, she went out.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
There.
Yes. No, my voice doesn't usually, go back and forth into Munchkin land there.
We could, Anne Marie, we could just do the audio. It's fine. That's not a problem.
Okay. Well, let me know if you can hear me well or not.
Yeah, I can hear you great. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I've been doing this for a long time, 10 industries and 29 years. I've had the opportunity to see cybersecurity through very different lenses. I've been in federal law enforcement with the Secret Service as an advisor to the director. I've been a CISO a few times now. I've had teams of hundreds and I've had teams of one. I've been everywhere and focusing a lot on fintech and technology companies. What those experiences have taught me is that while the technologies might change, the fundamental challenges, have not. Even in the age of AI, it's still, it's more chaotic and it feels scarier. But we're still trying to tackle the same types of ambiguity problems, the same types of control plane. It's just in a different flavor of it. How do we get our arms around something? How do we see something? How do we get our arms around it? How do we defend it properly? How do we manage that risk? How do we make good decisions that are based in confidence and a calculated risk? How do we get people to move without disrupting the business? And that was true when we were tackling, known vulnerabilities with scanners, and it's true now that we're tackling the unknown of AI, and the chaos of AI. So, I think it's an interesting. It's been a wild ride over the past couple decades.
And you've kind of built and advised security programs across many different, from banking, you've done fintech, government, law enforcement, security vendors, tech, almost everything. When you look across all that experience, what keeps showing up as the same core problem?
Well, every speaking engagement I do, every time I talk about it, I'll say hygiene is a problem, and it absolutely is. It's hard to make good decisions when you don't have hygiene. But outside of hygiene, and then visibility into that hygiene is the second thing. You have to, if you can't see, you can't defend it. We've all said that. But what I don't think we talk about enough is what to do on the things you can see when you do get that data. And I think the answer there is confidence in your decisions. Most organizations have more visibility than they did a decade ago. They have, cloud inventories, they have identity systems, they have vulnerability scanners and DSPM tools, threat intel. They have all of these things, but yet they're still struggling on what to do next. How do we prioritize that? It's not just finding risk anymore, it's understanding the risk well enough to act on it confidently. And acting means, do we accept it? Do we mitigate it? Do we escalate it? Do we fund it? Do we remediate? What do we do? Do we block it? Do we how do we recover? I think organizations that perform well aren't necessarily the ones that see the most. If you're listening to this live stream, you're probably well familiar with the wall of alerts, well familiar with being crushed with so much data, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's the ones that have enough clarity and context to make decisions quickly and confidently where it's important. And quickly is and confidently, those are two very different things, but they're very necessary things, right? Because it builds upon being able to strengthen, defend, and recover in a way that's going to keep your business afloat.
And that's a great point. I was actually, my next question was going to talk about security teams having more tools, dashboards, agents, logs, the flooding of alerts with more tools that they have, obviously. And, why do so many of these organizations still not know what data they have, where it lives, how it touches, and how it moves? They seem to have no visibility into that at all.
Well, I mean, the data problem has evolved. Most companies still don't know where their data lives. And a lot of that is, again, a hygiene problem. We're even understanding what it is. But I think we're getting better there. I think we've made strides there, but it's dramatically more complex than it was before. It's no longer just sitting in a handful of databases, inside a corporate network. It's moving across cloud environments. It's being shared across regions and SaaS applications and collaboration platforms. Now you have AI agents and assistants. You have people creating applications on the fly that have never created them before, that are making connections into data repositories, and they have no idea why. They just like, oh, it works, right? Vibe coding is real. So we had shadow IT before. Now we have shadow applications with things that we've never that have never produced any or gone through any quality checks. So you've got all these third-party services or things that are created that you don't govern, but may have been granted access rights, and things are just being shared all over the place. And much of the time, hopefully, the traffic is encrypted. So how do you see that, right? You have applications that communicate through APIs. That didn't exist at scale 15, 20 years ago. You have users that can authorize those integrations with just a click, right?
Yep.
That was a lot harder a long time ago. And of course, I mentioned AI tools can ingest and process data without going through those traditional workflows. And so we lose that governance. So it's not surprising that organizations can't tell you where their data is stored. Some can, and there's some tools that have really evolved to help us do that. And I'm a fan of a good few of them, right? I think they have worked. But there's very few that can tell you where it went. You can kind of see who may have had access to it in some of the tools too, right? We're getting maturity around that. But I think there's this growing gap. We have no idea where it went. We have no idea where it goes. And then there's a gap of how do we stop it from going somewhere? When we have no inventory over here of apps and connections. And so that inventory problem isn't just it's not simply inventory, right? It's understanding data in motion, because it moves faster than your visibility and risk accumulates. It moves it moves faster than that. And so it feels like your risk is going to explode, but it does it sort of quietly until it's really not quiet, until there's a big problem, right? So, I think visibility into data movement, into usage, and sharing between applications has become so important because it's true. You're right. You've got all of these things, but you can't protect what you can't see, but you also can't govern what you don't understand, right?
Yeah,
And I think
of course.
that's a big part of the problem. Most security controls are built around data at rest or data in transit.
Right.
If you have the hygiene beneath it to let them work, big if, right?
Exactly.
But the modern risk, I think, runs kind of at that runtime layer. When a user, an application, an AI assistant, a browser session, right, actively interacts with that data. That's where that context, I think, exists, and we haven't had a lot of good tools yet that can solve that, right? If I only know where a file lives, and I'm missing a large part of that story, right? But
Yeah.
I need to understand what happens to it when it's being used and where it goes. It's a long
So, Anne
soliloquy.
Marie, let's kind of dive into a little bit. I'm going to hand this over to Bonnie, but let's kind of talk a little more in detail about why the visibility is still broken, and how do you see that?
Well,
Yeah,
I think,
go
I'm
go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead, Bonnie. Did you have a follow up to that or?
Yeah, I actually have a question based on, kind of where you were going with that is when you talked about, data flow and, in the pieces of it's not data at rest anymore or data, at endpoints, let's put it that way. What does good data flow visibility look like today? And what does bad common look like? Bad but common look like. I think there's two things. There's the good flow and then there's what we're all accepting.
I'm going to have to ask you to repeat because I know you can hear me fine, but
Yeah.
the the two of you are sped up on like 3 times speed. So to me, it sounds like chipmunks. So I
Oh,
couldn't hear Bonnie's question.
okay.
I'm sorry, but I would love to actually listen to what you hear.
It's
Might be
great.
with
It's
my phone.
great. It's like we've all had too much caffeine and we're sitting in front of Alvin, Simon, and Theodore. Okay, so give it to me again.
So you talked about data at rest and data endpoints and data, in process. What does good data flow visibility look like today? And I mean, I want to contrast that with bad but common. What do we all accept because we don't know any better?
Well, I think they're two different things. Let's talk about vibe coding for a second, okay? And I want to give credit to a good friend of mine. His name is Brian Markham. He's a CISO over at EAB, and he just did a great talk on governance over vibe coding. So, if some engineers cringe at that term, but it's basically now that we have these wonderful AI tools that can turn anybody into a developer and an engineer, um, we have this problem, right? Where we have corporate or we have a lot of companies that are really looking for savings, innovation with the use of AI. So they have even incentivized, right, their workforce to say, we need you to use AI wherever you can, prove to us that you're doing it. And a lot of times it's showing up on your performance reviews. How did you use it? Okay, so then they're teaching themselves how to create a business flow, how to automate a process, come up with a little app. Because we know that, like Jurassic Park, life finds a way. And
Mhm.
if someone needs to get their job done easier, they're going to find a way to do it. Right. So with shadow IT, we've seen this for years, right? Same type of problem where they go and find a solution that is not exactly governed. The difference here is instead of finding a commercial off the shelf product that hopefully has been through some sort of rigor in order it to be marketed and be able to be purchased or downloaded or something, right? They're creating it themselves. And a lot of times these are folks who have never created anything, right? So quality processes, safety processes are not there.
Mm.
So that creates a whole problem, where you're having permissions, you get reliability on something, they're using stuff, and they don't, they're not experts in, data security or anything like that. We have enough problems with that on things we do develop in-house, right? That are going through these different quality checks. So you have this vibe coding issue that's creating a problem on where things could be unintentionally shared, with good intent, but unintended consequences. Okay, so that's kind of what is exploding on that side, right? We don't know what's connected to things because we're not governing the creation of new applications in our companies yet. So I have a lot of clients that are asking me, how do I claw that back? Remember when we all started to go to the cloud and they're like, how do I claw things back from
Mm.
sharing it over every region and snapshotting 220 things a day? When I accidentally clicked the continuous snapshotting button. I don't know why everybody has that voice in my head, but I do. Okay, so you got to claw that back.
I was going to ask, do we sound like that now with the chipmunk?
Well, you kind of do.
I'm like,
That's funny.
You kind of do. I love it. This is my favorite hour of today, and I'm going to be on the hill later, so that'll be great. Okay, so that is that. So right now we have tools that are maturing in the market, the DSPM market or DPSM market, that will show you where the data is stored, and it can crawl repositories and show you where sensitive data is stored, right? But it doesn't tell you where it's going to go. So you asked me, what does a good data flow visibility look like today, right? And and what does bad but common look like, I would say. I think bad but common visibility is knowing where the data is stored, but having very little understanding of how it is used and where it actually goes, the actual movement, not who can access it. That's also a problem. And that's obviously relevant when you have, investigations or you have data sovereignty issues, right? You're not supposed to be able to access with certain nationalities and things like that. And we've seen some of that in the news. That's a need. And that's also exploding, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years, really much in the last 7, I would say, where nation states are putting more attention on that. So our organizations have invested heavily in data at rest, and they should. So they know what's in SharePoint. They know what's in OneDrive. Maybe they know what's in their cloud storage repositories, right? They may even know who has access, but that's only part of the story. So good data visibility means I have to be able to answer questions like who accessed the data, what application did it touch, where did it move? Did I violate any sovereignty rules? Did my data go to Europe? Did Europe come to me? Right? Did it go to an unsanctioned, I don't want to say unsanctioned, an unapproved third party? Was it copied somewhere? Was it uploaded to an AI tool? Was it shared with a third party? Did it fundamentally cross a trust boundary? And there's only a couple, I think, technologies that can start to solve that problem, that runtime visibility problem, and they're all relatively new, powerful, but they're new. So it's, the TLDR, which I love it when people TLDR at the end of an enormous soliloquy. Could I start with that? It's not just about the location of the data, it's the journey of the data. And historically, security focused a lot on data at rest and endpoints, and both are important. You got to start there. That's where the technology sat. But increasingly, right, risk emerges in that space between them, where where the data is actually going and how it's actually being used. I think that's where the modern work happens. That's where collaboration happens. That's where AI happens.
It feels like the risk has gone up substantially with this movement of data over what we used to assess as, again, where we needed to encrypt it. I mean, so then we started talking about encryption in transit. How does encryption in transit help with any of this security piece that we're talking about of it moving along and we're not exactly sure where it goes or where it stops?
Okay, I think you asked.
Yeah.
I think you asked.
Text it to you.
How does encryption in transit affect how security teams can see where data goes?
Mm,
Well, is that what you asked me?
yeah, essentially.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's a good question because that's where traditional uh, visibility breaks down. And it's meant to. You're not supposed to protect it that way. But and there are technologies like QPoint, for example, that can show you where that goes before it gets encrypted. I think one of the biggest changes over the last decade is that we've dramatically improved privacy and security through encryption, right? And that's the good thing. But again, the vast majority of web traffic today is encrypted, and hopefully it is, and that's now by design, right? Cloud applications use encrypted APIs. It should that, and if your data is not encrypted, you gotta encrypt it. Like that is a standard, right? But the challenge is that many of the traditional security controls were built for a world where they could inspect traffic in transit, and they
Mm,
can't if it's encrypted unless it's a special tool like QPoint, right? So you could see what before it was encrypted, you could see what was moving across the network and make decisions based on that visibility. But because it's encrypted end to end now, your security teams are going to see that a connection occurred, but they can't necessarily see what happened within that connection, unless they're doing something pre-connection, right? So we have that, sort of interesting paradox, if you will, right? We've increased security through encryption, but we've also reduced visibility into how that sensitive data is being used. And of course, the good news is we're starting to understand that and solve that problem. But that's why I see this shift towards like runtime visibility for security teams, shifting their focus from inspecting, necessarily network to understanding, the activity closer to where the data is actually being used. Does that make sense?
mm,
So like, instead of saying, can I see the packet? They're going to say, can I see the user? Can I see the application? Can I see the workflow? Can I see what happened to the data at the moment it was in use? So I think in that sense, runtime visibility is becoming more important. And, because the network is a little harder to be a more reliable place for observing that kind of stuff because we've improved security in one sense, in a lot of senses. So,
absolutely. Thank you. And Aaron, I want to hand this back to you now because we're really getting into that visibility piece.
Yeah, that makes sense.
How do we know, and when do we know, and what do we know? So,
And I'll try to talk a little bit slower if I still sound like a chipmunk, so sorry. So our current title frames visibility as the new control plane, okay? Can you kind of walk us through what that means operationally in the traditional model, where controls come first? So we have the firewalls, access policies, the DLP, logging, monitoring. Have we had that order wrong the entire time?
I don't think the order is wrong. And, historically we deployed controls and hoped they would reduce risk.
Yeah.
In fact, we still do that, right? But, today, I think if we think about visibility in a lot of the ways we just discussed, it should help us determine where controls should exist, right? And what controls matter the most and whether or not they're actually working, right? Like we keep saying not to use hope as a strategy, but there's always some of that in there, I think. Visibility isn't replacing controls, it's informing controls.
Yeah.
All right. So if I understand where critical data lives and who can access it and how it moves and where it's exposed, I can make dramatically better decisions, I think, than, about security investments, about remediation, about how to enable the business properly, how to protect the business interests, as a risk equation. In that sense, I think visibility becomes the foundation upon which a control is built, right? You can't intelligently prioritize what you cannot clearly see and what you cannot attach meaning to,
Of course.
Mhm.
you know.
So when we go that you talked about, maybe we went to the adversaries a little bit, but what changes when an organization looks at its environment? What are the changes they make to look at how an adversary would attack?
You know, I've been thinking about this question,
Yeah,
and one of the things that I think security teams get frustrated with is when they're talking to their counter disciplines that don't live this life every day.
yeah,
And the counter disciplines that are not necessarily rooted in security. I mean, we think, live and breathe this stuff, and we can take for granted that other people don't. you
Yeah.
know and the thing is, we have to abide by a set of rules. We can't hack back, we can't do anything illegal, we can't violate the law, right? We can't violate regulations, right? We have to keep the business in business. That's our job, right? So I think when people say, "Oh, well, if I look at it from a hacker perspective, or for not hacker perspective, from a adversary perspective,"
yeah.
I think sometimes we forget that they don't have rules. They don't have rules, and they don't care about sexy. They care about getting it done. There are threat actors, of course, that will do it for notoriety, that will do it because they want to see if they can. They're going to do it for sport, sure, but most of the time they're doing it for economic gain, right?
Of course.
And of course, in wartime and heightened political times, you're going to see more folks that just want to go in and damage you for damage sake, for whatever statement they want to make. Now, through all of those motives, maybe one or two are going to do it for the glory to see if, oh, can I get to the biggest mountain and can I do it the most sophisticated way? Sure. Most of them, they don't care. They're going to go in and smash and grab the easiest way they can, least resistance possible.
Of
A
course.
lot of them have, if they're working for a nation state or working for organized crime, they have other things to do in their life, right? They want to get in and get out. They want to do it fast. They want to create persistence. And so I think the biggest difference is we think about it, if we're looking at it through our lens, we have all of these things that we have to do, and we have to do it right, on the right side of right. The attacker does not really have any barriers that way, right? So they don't care about the rules. There's nothing sacred. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Whereas
it
we're
does.
talking to other people. I remember having this one conversation with a CIO, and he said, "Well, Amzi, they're not going to care about those, little vulnerabilities because they're not sexy.
Yeah, right.
How are they going to present at a conference that?" And I just looked at him in the face, and I'm like, "Do you think they want to present at a conference? They want to steal the money. They want to steal the data.
And
They don't
honestly,
want their
guys,
faces known. They
look
want
at the
to
recent
smash through the front door
attacks.
and leave, right?
Look at the recent attacks we've had too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
My
And then they want
daughter's
to
a
create.
college student, and she got her system knocked out for several days from I forget the name of the group. Bonnie, do you remember the name? That
No,
just
no.
did the attacks all over the school systems. And
Yeah, when
Oh,
they,
they're
sure.
yeah.
it was Shiny
Yeah.
Hunters. Is that the name? Am I saying it correctly? They very simplified attacks. They're not using these advanced APT. They're just finding the easiest way to get in the door. And I wonder if that's kind of normal today.
Mm.
Oh, did we lose her? Anne Marie, are you still there? I think we just lost her for a second. Sorry, all. Yeah, she had to jump off. We've been having some communication problems. I know we're live, but there we go. Here she comes back in. There we go. And we have
Speaking of which,
and we
clearly
have
someone
video.
didn't like that
And we have
answer.
video. And we have video too. Let me just.
Yeah. All right. That's good.
There we go. Is that okay? Okay. So yeah. So we'll just do the audio. Does that work better, Anne Marie?
Mm.
Okay. All right. So what we can do until she comes back on. I guess, Bonnie, we could talk about this topic if you would like.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing to remember is the most sophisticated attack is the one that works.
Is the
Okay.
one that, yeah, and the shiny
Yeah,
hunters, I was referring about that,
exactly.
It was
I mean, they
very
took
simple. Yeah, go ahead. I'm
it's
sorry.
a grading system and any exchange, the whiteboarding system that is
Yes.
used in schools now. And so it doesn't have to be the most expensive solution if it works. Yeah, I think one of the conversations I have a lot in this industry is that there she is,
Yeah.
back.
She's like, we're almost there.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you hear us, Anne Marie?
I don't think she's got audio.
Yeah. But Bonnie, you could go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that was the piece is time and money are on their side. And so why spend a lot of money against a simple problem?
Yes.
Sometimes you just, you can just go out there and hit and see what you get. Particularly if you're not a nation state actor. I think, nation state actors are much more interested in the persistence piece than are the criminals. I mean, for them, it's a grab and go.
I was going to ask you this question. So do you think nation states, it's more about getting inside and staying inside quietly
Well,
and having access than destroying everything? Because, I could understand if a nation state goes, okay, we want to get inside, we want to be quiet, we want to get into these core systems, and especially in a major conflict breaks out, and then you could utilize that to cause problems. Is that kind of the main objective, or is it a little different?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, remember, intelligence is its own entity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so if I know what you're intending to do and I can get into your thinking, there's a big piece of that. I mean, that's why we've been doing this for so long.
Yeah.
Anne Marie, are you back? Can you hear us now?
I'm back.
Okay. If you.
Yeah, she just keeps on cutting on and off.
Yeah. Are you there?
Oh,
I am here.
So if we leave your camera off, better bandwidth on this thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think, Anne Marie, we could just hear the audio. Yeah, the audio was actually pretty good.
Great.
So let's do that. Is that okay?
Oh, did we lose her again? I think we did. So,
Yeah.
as we're waiting, I think the thing to remember is the goal of intelligence is to get the information on plans and intentions.
Yes.
I mean, because we're all inherently paranoid. What are they intending to do? And so, and it's particularly what are they intending to do to us?
Yeah.
So if you're aimed toward those sectors where you can get plans and intentions, you would want to stay there in a way that you stay undetected as long as possible.
Exactly. Especially targeting, and they're looking at the defense industrial base and those companies. We've obviously through history, we've known there's been a problem with attacks at those major manufacturers and stealing, our core tech for that. That's been a big issue. And we know it's been a big issue because we could look at the planes and the technology coming out of them, and it's very similar to ours.
Well, in some degrees, I would call that industrial espionage. I mean,
Yes.
It's also, yes, they're getting our most advanced technology. And, one of the things that people used to ask me is why don't they stop people being able to do this? And I think there was a certain arrogance in the U.S. mindset of, well, we could just make more. We'll just do better.
Yeah.
And some of the conversation became more and more about, but time to market matters.
Yeah.
And so if they can get it out there, I mean, we're in a disposable kind of mindset economy, right? Everybody's searching for that latest and greatest next technology. I don't care if it's inferior, if it's cheap, because I'm going to throw it away anyway.
Yeah.
And so this idea of we're going to sell you the best and the greatest and the most perfect actually doesn't matter anymore. So what they are doing is they're stealing your R&D.
Yeah.
And so where do you make up for that? Well, on the back end with charging higher prices, because you're going to have to get your costs back someplace.
Yeah.
So protecting that intellectual property, I think, is hugely important.
I
But
agree. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, Anne Marie, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay. You are coming in a little bit crackled, but I could still
Yeah.
hear you okay.
There is a crackle. Yeah.
But I think it's good enough. So, Anne Marie, let's get in. Look at the time. We got about 12:38.
I think she's gone again.
Oh, she go. Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure this is gonna. That's gonna.
So so back to I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah.
Is what's your intellectual property worth to you? And so much of what goes on inside of a business that we're trying to protect, if you separate that from the nation state piece of it, right? Critical infrastructure piece. We're
Yes.
trying to protect our intellectual property because that's your gold, if you will. That's your treasure.
Yeah.
And so if you're not willing to protect your treasure, then what are you willing to protect?
That when I was working in the OT side and protecting those core infrastructure sites, it was an eye opener of, the traditional of, we got to worry about the data centers. We have to worry about our data and everything else. But then you walk into these plants and they're worried about a cracking unit getting malfunctioning and blowing up and burning and hurting people. It is a very different mindset. And it was an eye opener to me that cybersecurity can risk lives, if it's not handled properly. It could actually hurt people.
Well,
And
I think,
I'm sorry.
what I'm noticing is the more sophisticated companies and entities are starting to put security in one bin. It's
Yeah.
not just cybersecurity. It's not just physical security. They're actually turning it into overall security
Yeah.
so that you're getting more attention on the bigger picture as
Yep.
opposed to, well, them guys do this and we guys do
Yeah,
this.
they just do physical and we just do cyber, and you're right. And then bringing it together.
I think it's more sophisticated to view it as it's a security issue.
So crazy.
Yeah, this is it's been one of those events, AMC.
Can you hear us? Well, you could probably hear my dog barking in the background.
Yeah,
Every event, my gosh.
Yeah.
He stays quiet for 20 hours, and then right when I turn on the show, Bonnie, and it's barking.
Well, they usually talk. So anyway, so I think a bigger piece of it is what role do we play in the overall security? So physical security and cybersecurity are security.
Yeah.
And I think that's that's a big part of what needs to be considered. The other piece about physical security is, as it relates to cybersecurity, is what do you do with your devices?
Yes.
Because is that a cybersecurity issue or is that a physical security issue? And there's, I think there's overlap in a lot of these areas. When I talk to hospital systems, they're also concerned about physical security in the sense of, violence against their workers. The hospital industry has seen an unprecedented amount of violence against hospital workers. I think
Yes, you're right.
Pandemic. The airline industry would lump violence against, airline industry workers as part of the overall security picture. So, so can cybersecurity and technical security help you with those things as well? Because those are system related issues. How do you tie that in?
It was interesting, Bonnie, in our last interview, he was a former, CISO within a hospital organization. And, he's like, I can't put CrowdStrike on a pump. I can't. He goes, so all those devices we had, everything was impossible.
Yeah.
And he goes, you have to have visibility, but beyond that, there is no security tools to put on, a pump for IVIG or something like that to be able to do that. But it's still connected. So I think we have you back on. I think we're good.
This is the best connection ever.
This has been the
The
best one.
best. I know.
Yeah.
I switched-
So
I
we're going to
switched
start right
gears.
over again.
Let's start over.
I know. I'm sorry. I know Bonnie's got to stop.
So we kind of moved into
Yeah.
this idea of physical security and basically cybersecurity, the technical security piece. and the connections between those two. Whereas before, as I said, it was them guys and us guys. It really is all us guys now. And how does that have to play with each other in the space that, if you don't have physical security, chances are good you don't have the hygiene even on your systems that you need to protect your data.
So when you're talking about physical security, are you talking more about, generally when I say physical, we're talking about people, we're talking about locations. Yeah, I do see a convergence of that. Companies that I've worked at before, and I myself have been had both physical and cyber as the chief security officer. And I think that's a smart move because, a lot of the information that you get on protecting a physical asset comes through digital means, right? And when you're protecting your organization, you're going to need to know, like, access control is huge discipline in both of those areas, right? So I do see that a lot. A camera is a physical security device, but it's also a network connected device, right? A data center outage, may have begun as a physical event, but it becomes a cyber resilience event. So I think the more those worlds work together, I think the better off you can be to respond quickly to either genre of event. Investigations usually have some sort of both. If it's a physical security, there's going to be a digital element to it.
So this is good. I know, Anne Marie, you talked about, we mentioned this before about, we only have 15 more minutes. But Bonnie, is it okay you covered the area of talk about AI, the DSPM compliance, and the hype problem? Anne Marie, is it okay if we kind of move into that section and then talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I might actually take you a little bit into the quantum space too, since somebody sent me a doomsday kind of message on quantum and what it's going to do. So AI is making the data problem harder in two directions at once, it seems. I mean, it's like, how do you secure what you've got when your people are putting stuff out there all the time, right? The ocean's getting bigger, and it's being sold as a way to solve visibility. Where do you see AI actually earning its keep in data security right now? And where is it mostly hype?
Oh, those are good questions. Those are big questions. So I think AI can solve a lot of things if we govern it properly, right? And that's like a easy answer to say. Governing is never easy. It's never easy because people don't like to be told what to do, right? And they're incentivized, just like the whole nobody wants to fix engineering vulns, right? They have a whole backlog for features. This is another feature. But AI is able, obviously the speed of AI to synthesize things is incredible. You can help scale the human that way in ways that have never been able to be done before. What would take a tier 3 seasoned analyst days to write, to reverse engineer a piece of malware or what have you, can be done in seconds, can be tuned in hours, right? The problem is, though, I think you need that human in the loop, because tuning it against the hallucinations are a big thing. And a lot of people really do not give credit to how much time that takes. So it can scale your human, but there's going to be an initial piece, I think, where that human really has to learn how to train their own model and tune their own tool, right? Even if you take a basic example of writing reports, right, which speeds every human up, being able to create something that's coherent, until they have to take into account the iteration process. You can't just tell AI to write you something and then spit it out and run. That's what everybody eye rolls at. That's what everybody yells at. Oh my God, it's AI slop. But if you help it articulate and you say, what if, that can still take hours. But the end result, the quality is usually better, and still the time is compressed. So I think it can help that way. And obviously ingest a bunch of, by definition, it's taking a lot of data and synthesizing it in ways that humans could not do at scale. But the context that humans bring, I think, is still quite relevant and still quite needed, especially in, very few organizations are at the agentic side where they're blocking things automatically. But I think they can get there a lot quicker than they believe. But to our conversation earlier, it's about confidence in the data and confidence in the decision. If you're starting out with a new tool, are you going to turn on blocking right away? In a security tool, you've got to learn the environment. You have to start with lower risk, higher confidence decisions that you can automate and then scale that appropriately, right? So I think AI can make a big difference there as well. I see a lot of great use in SOC operations for sure. Again, in report writing and synthesizing the data. But it can, again, this whole mandate from the beginning on use AI anywhere, how like an executive will say, use AI everywhere. But no, we have no real thought process of the intent of the consequences of that.
Yeah, use AI everywhere. How come I can't get into that file? Well, because, AI blocked your access. Well, why did it do that? Well,
it can, exactly. So it can block things. It can, if you've turned things on without learning about them and doing it in a staged way, then of course you're going to create problems.
Yeah.
Of course you are. You're going to hear a lot of noise from the business when you start blocking things that you haven't learned the context about. But eventually you should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Right? You should be able to tune it and evolve and reap those benefits, right? Where, remember, we talked, it's not just visibility, it's what do you do with the visibility? If you know that a piece of data should not be going across a certain trust border, then you should be able to confidently block that.
That's right.
Right? And the more you learn, the faster that'll happen, right? And the more use cases you can expand to do that. But I think many times I hear people say, well, but can't I just turn this on? Or with security, no, you can't just turn this on because it's going to break everything. And that's true if you don't learn about it. But that's with anything. It's not the technology, it's the use of the technology.
Well, it's not just going to break everything, but what if it goes places you don't want it to go? And I
Exactly.
think that's your point, right?
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day about about AI governance, and it was an organization that doesn't really have good AI governance right now. And I was trying to explain this concept of the data wants to connect. And even though you think you're masking everything, if you're putting data out there, it's not in isolation of other data. Because
that's true.
People are putting out there about themselves, or they're putting stuff out there about this issue. And so you think you've got it adequately masked. If the data is out there, it will seek connection.
Well, because you can correlate things so much,
of course,
right? Even if it's masked. I think this happened back in the 80s even, right? Where, I date myself, where they tried to anonymize birth records, but they found that if you have a person's date of birth and their city, I think there's a disparate, 60 or 70%, you can identify the person in their zip code, just by not even just the day and the month, not even the year, right? You could do that. So that was in the 80s,
Yeah. And so
don't quote me on the timeline, but it's as an analogy, right? That was super simple back then. So imagine what we could do now for identification and all of the content that we have out there. But then you'll have people say, well, but how come they can't identify cats and dogs? And they made a whole movie about that, how AI was defeated because they put dog pictures up,
Well,
yes, there's hallucinations, sure, but
Well, you could come up with any number of isolated incidents where it was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, but for that, there's a whole lot of other examples of where it was right, and sadly, it was right. So, or gladly, it was right. Take your pick. But I think that's the bigger piece of it is, so when what changes when employees can move sensitive data into AI tools, copilots, plugins, and automated workflow is a big question. I think that that we're still trying to figure out the governance piece for, right? What changes?
Well, what changes is that you're exploding your risk. You know, if you haven't thought about that use case in your risk model, and there's a lot of folks that just aren't there yet, right? First, you know, and that's okay. That's okay. And a lot of people aren't. This isn't I absolutely dislike when people in this chair or in this seat start judging everybody else in security. Unless you've been in the seat and have tried to actually remediate the things and actually work it instead of being a talking head, my God, it's difficult. Okay. And you can't just block everything until you see everything, until you see some things. You know, you can't just throw things out there and let the business explodes. What are you there for? You know, you've made things worse. So I think, you know, security oftentimes has to react to the conditions of the business. You know, and if we spend all this time judging it, you know, the business decisions that we are not in the room for, you can drive yourself crazy, you know, and then you do not become that trusted partner. They have the right to set the direction of the business. Your job is that Sherpa to get them safely up that mountain and bring them down. Okay, not which mountain they want to go on. They said they want to go up this mountain. Cool. They hired you to help them go up there. Great. Help them get up, help them get down. Make sure they don't kill anybody or themselves on the way up or down in the process. Right? You're the Sherpa. So I think as we've had this mandate, this is a condition of the field. This is a condition of the environment. Now, if you're running a tabletop, it's the inject, right? You've had the business say it. Now everybody has to use AI. Find a way. Make it faster. And show us you've increased productivity. Okay, that's the current state. Could it change in the next year? Could there be a clawback to that? Sure. Could they say, hey, we're not getting a bunch of these gains that we thought, and now things are even messier? Yes. We've seen rehiring of people come back. That's going to happen. Okay. But right now, we've got to acknowledge that there are people that are using technologies that we did not account for. We got to figure out what they are. And we have to do it in a way where people are going to tell us and not freak out about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've created all this stuff and you've been using well. Great. What are we going to do about it? Give them a way to come back and tell you that they've created it. Get a way to kind of inventory it, right? And then have it go through a review. So at least you know, and then you can do something about it. But I think maybe we're getting off from your first question there, but I think it's irritating for a lot of the business and even a lot of the folks that are trying to actually solve the problem for people to just admire it the whole time and point fingers on, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. Super. We'll learn about it. Great. Tell me, give me an hour. Tell me everything you think is wrong. Okay, now tell me how we solve the first part, then the second part, then the third part. I don't want to hear about, how the business is constantly making bad decisions. Or if you're not the CEO, right, and you're not in that seat, mm-hmm. You can go back and tell them when they ask you, right? But I think we just spend too much time saying, oh my God, nobody thought of this. Well, a lot of startups don't do that. A lot of security startups that are now behemoths didn't do that in the beginning.
That's right. They just took a chance.
Justify.
I think that's the message, right? It's like stop, looking to blame and figure out how to move forward with. Yeah. Because the reality it's here.
Let's do something about it, and do it. Start it small and test it. Then they'll come up with every edge case in the world to delay action, right? To delay that hard conversation that they're going to have with the business to say, hey, this is what we have to do, and let's be smart about it. I'm not asking you to solve the world right now, but let's see what happens if we put controls over here. Is it going to break? Oop, did it break? Oh, it didn't break. We were afraid about nothing. And then we expand it. Something's going to break within a test at some point. That's going to happen. How do we recover?
I would hope it would, because then you get some validation of what you're
Well,
doing.
you learn.
Yeah.
You learn through it, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, we have 3 minutes left. I'm happy to come back on again since we lost.
I would love to do that. And listen,
Amazing.
this happens. We've had it happen before, and it's all right. We could set this up again.
Yeah.
You know,
AMZ, I'd love to have you come back.
Yeah, it would be fun. I think we have a great conversation, and you know, this was a good time.
awesome.
So Aaron, I'm gonna
and I know you have to go.
Yeah.
But Anne Marie, if you want to promote anything, kind of what you're working on, the company you're working for,
Yeah.
we would love to hear that right now.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a CISO to many. I'm really supporting a great company called QPoint right now, who solves a lot of the visibility problems in runtime security, so they can tell you where data leaves, and I love that. I'm also a fellow at the National Security Institute, and so we're doing good work there. I want to shout out to Hackers on the Hill today, so we're going to join you up over on Capitol Hill, and
You're going to Capitol Hill.
Yes, help advocate for security in every genre.
Do you go up to the Hill a lot, or?
I do. I get called upon, yes, in the federal spaces for sure.
You know, I grew up in that area a little bit. My dad was a press secretary for a congressman for Guam.
Well, there you go. Mm-hmm. Look at this. We have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I grew up in that setting.
I love it. Yeah. So, you know, just another stop today.
Just another stop at the Hill. I love it.
Yeah, and I'll offer, you know, if anybody wants to chat more about these problems or you know, anything in security, you know, we'll make some time and we'll have another chat. But you can always hit me up on LinkedIn, and we'll get together.
Awesome. Anne Marie, Bonnie, thank you so much. If
Thanks,
you guys, Anne Marie, if you just want to stay on for a second, I'll just end it because there's a